Good morning, it's Thursday, the 16th of July. You're watching Euronews, and this is Europe Today. Welcome to the program, I'm Stefan Grobe. Coming up, the United States has launched a new wave of strikes on Iran as tensions flared over the critical Strait of Hormuz. According to the Iranian Health Ministry, 7 military personnel were killed and more than 260 people were injured. Meanwhile, US President Trump renewed his threat to bomb Iranian civilian infrastructure unless Tehran returns to the negotiating table. Global oil prices rose again. The European Commission and Ukraine have signed a new defense industrial partnership, marking a major step forward in the integration of the European and Ukrainian defense industries. One of the highlights of Ursula von der Leyen's one-day visit to Kiev. The Commission also launched the EU-Ukraine drone deal to deepen cooperation on drone and counter-drone technologies. More than 4 years into Russia's full-scale invasion, Ukraine faces mounting pressure on the battlefield. Russia continues its offensive. Drone and missile attacks remain relentless, and Kiev is urging its allies to deliver more weapons and faster. As Europe accelerates its own rearmament and debates its long-term security role, one question remains urgent. Can the European Union do enough to help Ukraine hold the line? We'll speak to EU Defense Commissioner Andrius Kubilius. And Argentina and Spain will meet in the World Cup final in New Jersey on Sunday. The defending champion kicked out England in Atlanta last night after a stunning 2-1 comeback victory with both Argentinian goals scored during the final minutes of the game. We'll have more later in the show. But first, the situation in the Middle East. The war in Iran risks turning into a war of attrition that could go on for a long period of time. President Trump visibly struggles to end the conflict. His about-face over his one-day proposal of a 20% fee on shipping in the Strait of Hormuz was just the latest example. The already fragile ceasefire agreement he struck with Tehran weeks ago seems to be dead, as strikes and counter-strikes have only intensified this week. Let's bring in Adel Hamil in Doha now, who can bring us up to date. Good morning, Adel. What is the situation in the area this morning?
Good morning, Stefan. The ceasefire may still exist on paper, but the fighting is only intensifying. Instead of de-escalation, both sides are ramping up military operations, and the conflict is spreading across the Gulf. The U.S. is keeping up its campaign against Iran. Wednesday marked a fifth straight day of strikes, and what's now interesting is that the pace has changed. Instead of just limiting to overnight operations, Washington is also striking during the daylight as well, and that signals a more sustained military campaign. The focus remains on the Strait of Hormuz. The U.S. says it's targeting Iranian military sites to protect commercial shipping across one of the world's busiest energy routes. Now, meanwhile, Iran is responding across the region. Overnight, it claimed attacks on U.S. military facilities in Kuwait, Jordan, and Bahrain. Jordan says it intercepted 8 Iranian missiles. Kuwait says it downed 21 drones and 4 missiles, and air raid sirens were heard across Bahrain before dawn. So what's becoming clear is that this conflict is spreading, and that raises the risk of further escalation if more countries become involved. The bottom line is that the pace is increasing, the fighting the conflict is widening, and there is still no sign that either side is ready to back down. Stefan?
All right, Adel Halim in Doha for us. As ever, thank you for keeping us in the loop. European Commission President Ursula von der Leyen ended her one-day trip to Kiev on Wednesday, her 11th visit to Ukraine since the war broke out. She praised Ukraine's performance on the battlefield, saying that it has built a strong military momentum, and further adding that the tide is turning. Covering her visit for us was our correspondent Jorge Liborero, who sent us this report.
The visit of Ursula von der Leyen to Kiev concluded with a headline-making announcement, a deal between the European Union and Ukraine to jointly produce drones. It's the first of its kind and will allow Europeans to tap directly into Ukraine's cutting-edge expertise. Notably, the agreement will enable Ukraine to store some of these drones inside EU territory to protect them against Russian strikes. President Zelensky hailed the deal as a truly historic step and said that relations between the two sides are now deeper, stronger and more personal than ever before. But besides drones, there was a lot of talk, of course, about accession. President Zelensky and President von der Leyen both held the momentum in the process and encouraged member states to open new clusters of negotiations with Ukraine, a decision that requires unanimity, and we all know how difficult that can be. In fact, von der Leyen during the press conference gave us a very strong hint of what cluster might be next. Take a listen.
There are different clusters for different topics. For example, the cluster number 2 is for the internal market. And our candidate countries have very different starting positions. If you take Ukraine, Ukraine has already done a lot, what is potentially in the cluster 2. So it has done already homework in the cluster 2 because we have the DCFTA, the Deep and Comprehensive Free Trade Agreement. But even more, we also have, specifically only for Ukraine, the Ukraine facility that comes investment with reform. And the reforms are often concerning the single market. So, for example, that is a cluster where I would say it's ready to be opened because some of the work is already done by Ukraine. And I think this illustrates that we can truly say as soon as possible.
Jorge Liborero reporting from Kiev. Thank you very much. Ukraine is making gains against Russia. This includes striking more than 100 maritime vessels, including oil tankers and cargo ships, in less than 2 weeks, following attacks against oil refineries crippling Russia's energy infrastructure. For more on this, I'm now joined in the studio by our correspondent, Angela Skujins. Good morning, Angela. Now, you discussed this with the EU Defence Commissioner Andrius Kubilius. What did he have to say?
Good morning, Stefan. So, yes, he stated that these strikes by Ukraine are remarkable and could push potentially the Russian President Vladimir Putin to the negotiating table, hopefully bringing an end to the country's full-scale invasion of Ukraine, which is grinding into its 5th year. He also underscored the need, however, for Europe to get serious when it comes to its own defensive capabilities. This was underscored by statements on Wednesday from the Lithuanian and Latvian presidents stating that Russia could be potentially planning a sabotage attack against critical infrastructure in those Baltic and region, as well as Poland in particular. However, he underscored as well that Europe is coming to the table when it comes to supporting Ukraine. Of course, in that report just earlier, we saw that the European Commission President Ursula von der Leyen went to Kyiv to announce that mammoth drone deal. I did speak to the European Commissioner for Defence exclusively on Wednesday, and I started by asking him whether these strikes by Russia are short-wind victories or whether they could lead to a full-scale end to the bloodshed.
It's remarkable what Ukraine managed to achieve during recent half a year, with deep strikes against oil refineries close to Moscow, close to St. Petersburg, even far away, close to Omsk, somewhere in Siberia. Also, the recent week attacks against Russian shadow fleet in Azov Sea and in Black Sea, those are really amazing achievements, which are making big impact on in general on perception, both globally but also in Russia itself. Because definitely when in Moscow and some other cities, people need to stand near a gasoline station, for hours and hours, that's an impact. Definitely, we can expect that such kind of development should be a clear argument for Putin and his surrounding that he is not able to achieve any significant development in his war aims. And, that is the moment when really negotiations on just peace should start. But for that, really, we need to keep our support and even increase our support, because just peace in such a war can come only through the formula peace through strength, and strength should be on Ukrainian side.
And how does the European Union provide that strength to Ukraine?
We started new financial support mechanism, so-called Ukraine support loan, 60 billion to support Ukrainian defense during the next this year and the next year. From one side, we are supporting Ukraine. From another side, Ukraine is starting to support us, because the defense industry achievements are remarkable. And I absolutely agree with United States State Secretary Marco Rubio, who was saying that the Ukrainian army is the best in Europe. And it's the best in Europe, not only that they have brave soldiers and smart generals, but also that they have very innovative, very dynamic defense industry.
Should Ukraine be spending more to buy European?
European money has very clear principles. First of all, we're looking if Ukrainian defense industry is able to produce what they need to have on the front line. If not, then we're looking to European industry. And European industry really is getting up and producing more and more.
But is European industry, is it there yet to provide Ukraine with what it needs to repel Russia now?
If both Ukrainian industry is not producing and European industry is not producing, then no. And if Ukrainians are coming with clear evidence that why they need some kind of products which are not produced by Ukraine or by European Union.
US President Donald Trump at the NATO summit in Ankara reiterated his desire to acquire the Arctic island of Greenland. What can the EU do to come to that nation's aid if he made good on this defensive threat?
We have had the same, language several months ago, back in early spring or late winter. And our answer was very clear. Denmark was promised all the support from our side. We do not agree with some kind of that language.
The countries that have successfully acquired a portion of that safe loan, the 150 billion euros, what are the countries, particularly along Europe's eastern flank and those Baltic regions, using the money for?
Those countries who are investing a lot, frontier countries, they also took, the biggest responsibility to spend safe loans, which are European Union support mechanism for all the countries to develop their capabilities. We see that some countries are a little bit, diminishing their, let's say, initial wishes, what they wished. Now we have perhaps 11 or 12 signatures, different countries which we agreed with them. We shall see which will be not taken by member states, and we shall look into possibilities, how and for what purposes we can use those money. President Zelensky was very clearly asking exactly, to find the way how to finance, for example, this anti-ballistic production of an anti-ballistic system. So we shall look how we can do. Definitely, besides, those, actions which we are doing now, we need to see also challenges which are coming and very soon. Especially, we need to evaluate how our transatlantic partners are starting to diminish their presence.
EU Defense Commissioner Andrius Kubilius speaking to Angela Skujins. The war in Ukraine has created a new sense of threat among the general public in Europe. According to polls, a majority in many member states therefore supports increased defense spending. But not everyone is willing to make a personal contribution as well. In Germany, the number of applications for conscientious objection has continued to rise sharply and has already surpassed the previous year's figure in the first half of 2026. How to explain this trend? To find some answers, I'm now joined by Niklas Herbst. He's a member of the European Parliament from the European People's Party from Germany. Good morning and thanks for coming on.
Good morning. Thanks for having me.
So last year, there were fewer than 4,000 applications in Germany for conscientious objection. In the first half of this year alone, there have already been more than 5,000. Is fear of war driving this increase?
Basically, of course, people are in fear, but we have a new military service law that started on the 1st of January this year. So I think for many people so far, thinking about war was, we have soldiers doing that for me. in case if needed. But now I think this law also forces people to think about their own contribution.
And I mean, has the German government unintentionally frightened young people by constantly talking about the possibility of war?
I wouldn't say that. And of course, you have to put the numbers into perspective. We're talking about 5,000 people. It's not only young people, it's even, some reservists, some, former soldiers, people who are not even affected by the law. So it's not a, very high number.
I know, 5,000 in a country of 85 million.
Exactly.
But the increase is at least surprising.
It is, but on the other hand, you have a different number as well. The number of people who are revoking, who are withdrawing their objection is also rising. So you have, pacifists, for example, who now change their mind and say we would be willing to serve in the army in case if needed. So it's an interesting situation. And in the end, we need a discussion about resilience in society. That's the ultimate goal that we should have. We need to talk about our own resilience. There are many ways to serve your country and your fellow human beings, also in terms of collective defense. You don't have to take a weapon into your hand. There are other ways as well. So this is a broader discussion. And I wouldn't say that the government has, supported fear of war, but you have to be honest to people as well. And of course, people are watching the news and they know what's going on.
All right, Nicholas Herbst, MEP from Germany, from the Christian Democrats. Thank you so much for sharing your thoughts with us on this topic. And now to something entirely different. Chat Control 1.0, a temporary derogation from e-privacy rules designed to detect online child sexual abuse, was adopted by the European Parliament a few days ago. Ever since, the discussion about it remains heated. The controversy around Chat Control 1.0 is not primarily about its objective, fighting sexual abuse of children online, but about how it does so and what it means for privacy, encryption, and democratic oversight. To learn more, I'm now lucky enough to have Simeon de Brouwer by my side. He's a digital policy advisor at the European Digital Rights Network, IDRI. Good morning, and thanks for making time for us.
Good morning, Stefan.
So, your organization basically says chat control threatens fundamental rights, but your critics say you're putting privacy ahead of children's safety. Are they wrong?
Yes, they are wrong, because we're not putting it ahead, we're putting it together. There is a way to address this problem without doing mass surveillance and without undermining everyone's privacy and other fundamental rights, and this is what we're putting forward, proportionality.
And where do you draw the line between protecting privacy and protecting children?
Well, if you can do both at the same time, that's the line that you need to draw. And in the chat control, the big issue is mass surveillance, that is turning inquiry into a fishing net. Mass surveillance means treating everyone as a suspect instead of looking for actual clues, actual suspects.
If you reject chat control, what could be the alternative?
This is what the parliament itself is pushing. It's a way of doing scanning of communications, which is not undermining encryption and not mass surveillance. It is targeted scanning. And we can do this without turning everyone into a suspect. Of course, the solution is not in technology alone. We need also measures that are societal, and we need work with police. This is not really being done right now. For example, the police doesn't take down online material. This is a big issue.
All right. Simeon de Brouwer from European Digital Rights, thank you so much for coming on the show this morning. And now, the World Cup. Argentina 2, England 1. The uncompromising rivalry between these football nations has produced several memorable contests on the World Cup stage through the years, but this semi-final will be remembered as the stuff of legends in Argentina, as the South Americans denied England with 2 late sucker punches. The atmosphere was one of the most aggressive and nervous of all games in the competition already before kickoff, when supporters noisily booed the other team's national anthem. England had been on course to reach their first World Cup final since 1966 after Anthony Gordon fired them into the lead 10 minutes into the second half. After that, Argentina switched to constant attack mode, turning superstar Lionel Messi into the hero of the evening. First, Messi set up Enzo Fernandez to fire in an 85th minute equalizer, and then, with extra time looming, crossed for substitute Lautaro Martinez to head in the winner in the second minute of stoppage time. A personal triumph for Messi, who will become just the second player after Brazilian great Cafu to appear in 3 World Cup finals. There you have it. That does it for us today. I'm Stefan Grobe. Thank you for watching. Take care and see you tomorrow.